So I want to break down German history. Okay, so German history, the Grimm's fairy tales, it's inundated with kings, queens, princesses. There's not a story that doesn't have a king or a queen, and that's usually the happy ending for the poor peasant, right? It's some rich princess or prince takes care of the poor, humble fucking peasant that does something good. So if you're good, you know, eventually maybe some great fucking prince or knight in shining armor will come and rescue everybody. Otto von Bismarck is synonymous with Germany. So there's Adolf Hitler called Germany, he divided into three Reichs. His was the Third Reich, and the First Reich would have been the Holy Roman Empire. That's one Reich for 1,000 years. The second one is Otto von Bismarck, and I think King William the First, King Wilhelm the First, a German emperor. This asshole here. This he's going to take the credit. He's the monarch, but essentially Otto von Bismarck is the diplomat in the background. He's the one who's pushing William the First to unify Germany and create. You know, the modern state of Germany is essentially, they say it's because of Otto von Bismarck. He had 3 wars for German unification. First, they had a war against Denmark for the Holstein Schleswig portion of Germany, which is right next to Denmark, right? Right on that little sort of island. We're on the coastline where Bremerhaven is, or right close to Bremerhaven. And since Prussia's in the way for Austria to get to it right after that war, you know, they're allies, but eventually fucking Otto von Bismarck turns on his fucking Austrian allies and has an Austrian war with them. So first they fight a war against Denmark with Austria, and then because they wanted Denmark and they didn't want to give it to Austria, they wanted to have the whole thing to themselves, they declare war on Austria, and then they have the Austrian War of 1866, and then you have they declare war on France, right? So, and it looks like France is the aggressor. So they insulted, basically, there's some telegram, he lies on the telegram, insults the fucking French monarchy, and then they're all fucking pissed off, and because they're pissed off, they start a war, and which makes Otto von Bismarck looks like he's fighting for defensive purposes, which he is. And because he fights against, you know, France, all these Germans had just fought against Denmark, they fought against Austria, and now they're fighting against France. You know, the Austrians are now their brethren. They're all German-speaking countries, 39 speaking German countries, 16 states today. A lot of them were different kingdoms. Prussia was one kingdom. Westphalia was a kingdom. Saxony, Bavaria, Hesse, where the Hessians are from. So, and then those are nation states, right? Those are just the districts. You have city-states, too, of Berlin, and I guess Munster would be a city-state, sort of a smaller one than Hamburg or Bremen. So Hamburg, Bremen, and Berlin. Berlin seems to be that's the capital, isn't it? Is that the capital of Germany, Berlin? I feel like if it isn't, it should be. Munich. It might be Munich. So I guess Munich and Berlin, those are the 2 biggest cities. Okay, so Munich, Germany, Berlin, Germany, Otto von Bismarck. Okay, get out of Otto von Bismarck. So he's a chancellor, but he's a diplomat. So actually, he gets to look like he's a good, you know, type of German person because he was able to unify all these German-speaking countries. But that's all that had united them. So that's all English-speaking countries. If there had been somebody who wanted to unite Britain with America, right, and just invaded, I guess, both countries or something, then they would say, I'm uniting it for all English-speaking peoples, right? So that'd be weird if they actually did it intentionally that way, but because it was sort of in defensive purposes, the German barbarians have been sort of their own independent, autonomous folks that have been run by tribes, but they've been run by kings and queens for a long-ass time. So let's, actually, the overview is the kings and queens, right? So the German Empire, it was started by William the First, okay, and that's who starts Germany, right? And then Frederick III succeeds him, right after William the First dies. Frederick III becomes monarch, and they're part of the Hohenzollern house, the House of Hohenzollern. And then William II is monarch, and then he abdicates He gives up the throne 1918 with the German revolutions of 1918. So there's the German revolutions of 1848 failed, but the German revolutions of 1918 succeeded, and they succeeded in pushing the monarchy out of Germany, and so that ends the German Empire. He took over the emperor's chair, and so that's a lot of times the downfall of a lot of these countries. They're not just content with just being a republic. They want to expand their borders, right? They like the title emperor. They don't just want to be fucking king or president. They want to be emperor. I want to take over the world. And so that's William the First. He was a fucking emperor, right? He's credited with being the first monarch, the king, the leader of Germany, the first fucking one. And then you'll have Frederick the Third, and then you have William the Second. And then he abdicates, and then there's no monarchy. So the House of Hohenzollern isn't going to control anything. I think it's going to be elections. They're going to have democratic elections once the Allies decide to keep Germany as a country, but just basically defrock it and depants it and humiliate it and tax it for many years. So that's what they're going to keep Germany, and then you're going to have more sort of presidents and leaders and shit. But that's Hitler looked at William II abdicating as the great betrayal. It was all because he gave up and quit. If he hadn't gave up and quit, then therefore the German state would have been victorious and would have been strong. But he abdicated to the revolutionaries, the German revolutionaries, his own people, while he's engaged in this world war that was started by that Serbian nationalists that killed the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So that assassination starts this world war that sucks Germany into it. Germany actually was the one that pushed the ultimatum for Serbia. The Austrian-Hungarians had an ultimatum for Serbia, and Serbia said, fuck that, and then Russia backed the Serbians, and then there's all-out fucking war because everybody didn't, chose sides. So the fucking assassination of the Archduke of Austria-Hungary by a Serbian nationalist, started World War One. And why was America involved? Empire, imperial conquest. So, just to kill Germans, right? That's why Theodore Gripshover, and that's why George Anthony Gripshover was sent over to murder Germans. But anyways, they were emperors, right? So they were going to, their intent is to take over the world. So it's not, and they're monarchs too. So monarchy, just they're hereditary. So I guess Frederick III and William II were related to the first William, and that's how they got their fucking job. And that's not cool. That's not awesome because that's, hereditary. So basically it's just based upon your bloodlines and whether or not, and there's always issues, right? The English always has a bunch of issues with that. Sometimes there's left without any kids, and then what do? You go to your third, your second, your fourth, aunts, uncles, cousins, and you just go, where do you go? You just keep on getting farther and farther away. And it's not a good idea for a fucking system of any type just to give it to the person with the blood, like, oh yeah, hey, you have the same blood. No, that doesn't mean they're training who they are, what they think, has any fucking thing. They could very much be their father's son, or they could very well not be, So yes, these are the first monarchs, but this ends monarchy. Monarchy's fucking bullshit. That was the beheading of Marie Antoinette and King Louis XVI. So they chopped King Louis XVI's head off, and they chopped fucking Marie Antoinette's head off. That brings in the modern era. No more monarchies. These houses, these families just say we're the fucking leaders, and then everybody's just supposed to follow them just because. While it does provide stability and order, it's not democratic. It's, very much authoritarian, autocratic, dictatorial, and whatnot. So let's see. Let's find out. This is the overview of the German Empire. So that's pretty much, that's the Second Reich right there, right? So from 1817 to 1918, and then the Third Reich is going to be the rise of Hitler, supposedly, according to him. Now, William I was the president of the North German Confederation for 4 years before he became emperor, right? He becomes emperor in January, and when he becomes emperor, actually, that's when they decide that he's that Germany is all one country. Franz Joseph I, this man, he's the president of the German Confederation, the Emperor of Austria. There's going to be another Franz Joseph, the second or the third, I guess, later on. That's going to be Maximilian Damasco is going to renounce the Emperor of Austria because he's an American. When he becomes naturalized, he's actually, I think it's Francis Joseph, so it's going to be somebody that's, part of this guy's lineage. He's going to say, no, I renounce all allegiance to the fucking Emperor of whatever. Specifically, they named his name, right, because they're from Austria, but he was actually from Bohemia, so I don't know if they got the if that person would be controlling Bohemia at the same time. Now this is all Germany. So actually, I don't know. Like this King William IV, King of Prussia, Archduke John of Austria, Emperor of Austria, Emperor of Austria. So this is the people who are the leader of the German Confederation, and it looks like a bunch of Austrians, right? Emperor of Austria, Archduke John of Austria, and then just one King of Prussia here. He's probably like both of them, right? So German Confederation, the German Confederation of the Rhine. This is actually pretty interesting here. Napoleon I, Emperor of the French. He ruled the Confederation of the Rhine. So the fucking German Confederation was Napoleon Bonaparte for 7 years. 1806, the Napoleon fucking crushes all the princes and kings and all the fucking kingdoms and shit in Germany. In 1806, dissolves the Holy Roman Empire, right? Just like that, just fucking takes it out, right? He just sweeps through Europe, taking over everybody, using the French Revolution, the excitement from the French Revolution to supposedly spread his civil code. But he ain't revolutionary. He's a fucking emperor, and he's worse than Hitler. He's pretty psycho, and it took all the fucking countries. The liberals actually would side with the monarchs just to get rid of Napoleon, because there's the war, the first coalition, the second coalition, there's the war, the third coalition, fourth coalition, and Napoleon just keeps conquering and defeating the fifth coalition, sixth coalition, seventh, eighth coalition, and eventually, finally, he's got Waterloo. So they fucking stop him. They actually, when they first caught him, they threw him in prison, and then he comes back and becomes an emperor again, and he becomes the leader. So when they caught him, they, think about how he did to Saint Louverture. He throws him in a fucking dungeon in the prison and says, fuck you, and he starves to death. To Saint Louverture, the father of the Haitian revolutionaries, starves to death in the fucking prison. So you have Napoleon Bonaparte, who's sitting there saying that he's carrying on the French Revolution, but really he's a fucking dictator. And they didn't want to treat him badly, so they just sit him in prison, or they actually make him emperor of an island. They give him the island of Elba, and so he controls and tells other people what to do. He still has power, very tiny power, not compared to what he had, but it's not fucking prison, it's not dungeon, it's not death. He was responsible for so many people dying, right? He was a great tactician because he knew how to, like, where to send men, send them all in the middle, and then send them around, and then send them, you know what I mean? He knew how to give orders to a bunch of fucking people. But he died in Russia. He had a 500,000 army, and slowly but surely, the whole army just starves to death. It was too cold, fucking Russian winters. Napoleon, why did he want to take over Russia? I guess there was a shit ton of land. He would have had all of Asia, but play risk. You can't hold on to that. You can't hold all of fucking Eurasia. You got to stay in Australia, and you got to build all your shit up in Australia. Right, a tiny island or so. So that Napoleon, he controls Germany for 7 years. He's the man. He throws out the fucking dictators. The Prussian, I guess, monarchs is one I want to actually pay attention to, because during the German revolutions of 1848, they offer the German president, or the German monarch or whatever, the guy who was running things, the presidency, but he says no to it. So it's amazing, actually. They draft the Constitution, they come up with all these great ideas, and then they say, hey, why don't you lead this thing? And he was like, how dare the revolution ask me to be the leader? But that was actually such a brilliant move, to be the leader of the movement. He basically hijacks the movement. The revolutionary fervor breaks out. There was revolutions happening in France. So again, when shit happens, goes down in France, rest of fucking Europe just, explodes in fucking revolutions, and the same shit happened in Germany. So Germany, you have the 1848 revolutions happen. The liberals get together. You have the Frankfurt Diet. They have a constitution and the rights of the German people, which is actually like more specific and more rights for the Germans than anybody else. So it also sort of shows the supremacy of the German people over everybody else, because it's not the rights of man, not the rights of mankind, it's not a universal sort of what do they call that? Immanuel Kant. He called it the categorical imperative. So the Germans weren't being very universal actually with their rights, but I think you could probably universalize all that they had declared. So they have this Frankfurt Assembly Parliament. They basically construct a democratic government, and they just need the head, somebody to run the thing. And they could have asked the king of Austria, and they could have asked the king of Germany or Prussia, and they asked the king of Prussia, and Prussia turns it down. So who's this fucking king of Prussia? Who was the monarch, during the thing? And so here's all the kings of Prussia. We start out with Frederick I, who's the mercenary king. He starts in 1701. Now we know, was it 1811 is the earliest scripture we have is 1710. So you know he would have known who his king was, because this is Prussia and Westphalia, right? I think Westphalia has been under Prussia most of the time, but this is the continuity of Prussia, and more with the Prussian kings and princes and knights and monarchy and aristocracy coming up